Hello, folks. How you doing? I want to talk about a holiday. Well, the Lent season. Yeah, I'm probably in several religions. Well, the ancient Egyptians did. They had a Lent, you see, and we're talking about the 40 days, though. You see, uh, it so happened that at least during the climate, okay, and in ancient Egypt, okay, they were planting seed, okay, and with the right amount of water and sun, etc., that seed will germinate, push up through the soil and above ground, and flower into a plant, beautiful flower plant, whatever. Well, it took 40 days, you see. And so this 40 days led up to, let's say, the spring equinox. Okay, that's when the sun crosses over. Some folks call it the Passover. Okay, where the sun crosses or passes over the equinox. Okay, so what happens 40 days after the 40-day period, where folks did their fasting and whatnot, you know. But we also have another 40-day period that was very important to the Kemites, the ancient Egyptians, and that had to do with the flooding of the Nile, you see. Because Egypt then and now was a desert country, and their water source was the Nile River. It meant everything to them, their very life, because if the Nile didn't flood annually, those folks would go into a severe drought, famine situation. So they depended on it now, as they do today, as a matter of fact, because it don't rain there in Egypt. Well, maybe every 1,000 years or so they might get some rain. That's not enough. So they depend heavily upon the Nile. So now, at the summer solstice, okay, there was a great celebration in Egypt because of the Nile flood. The Nile rushed in for 40 days and 40 nights. At around the summer solstice. Because they were a desert country, it meant everything to them for this water to come rushing in. It flooded the land, but they had canals and they had their aqueducts and all that stuff. And it was a good time for them. Big celebration. This meant that they was going to have plenty of food. So the waters came in for 40 days and 40 nights, and this is why 40 became a sacred number. You see. Now, when going back to Lent, when that seed was planted, it took 40 years to break through the soil, 40 days to break through the soil. In the mythology, it was put down as the seed suffered for 40 days and 40 nights. So during the Lent season, some people suffer. Well, they fast. That's supposed to be a type of suffering. Some folks take it to another level. Some folks sort of punish themselves. You know what I mean? Beat themselves, bring forth blood and all that sort of stuff to show penitence. because the seed struggled for 40 days and nights, coming through the soil and to emerge and flower. So the seed, it said, suffered because it had to struggle its way through, had to fight its way through. And so that was sort of a suffering. And so people, okay, felt that maybe they should suffer also during those 40 days that led to the equinox, okay, the equinox and the resurrection. So, okay, so now when we have the solar god who resurrects at the equinox, there were several of them, he had come through struggling. And when he crosses over, when the sun crosses over, actually, it passes over the equator, the celestial equator, okay, the days become longer than the nights. They begin to become longer than the nights. But this isn't really noticed till after 3 days. You see what I mean? So the solar god didn't resurrect until after 3 days. Okay? And this is various traditions this happened. Okay? So we have the 40 days that were turned into 40 years by the Hebrews because when they passed through the Red Sea, okay, coming from the underworld, which they called the Lower Egypt. Here in this mythology situation, Lower Egypt is what the underworld, or Aminta, the hidden land. You see. And so the sun god usually would rise up, okay, at the equinox from the underworld, the hidden land, just like our seed did. And just like other solar gods did as they travel from the winter solstice, you know, when we have, you know what I mean, mostly night. It's a struggle, supposed to be a struggle for the solar god because he's coming through the darkness of the underworld, because there the nights are longer than the days between the winter solstice and the equinox. But when the sun crosses over the equinox, okay, the days begin to get longer. But now, the folks who crossed over through the Red Sea were coming from the underworld. And it said that coming through the underworld, you have to pass through water or over the water without getting wet. They didn't want to get wet. That was a bad sign. So they opened up the Red Sea for them, and they crossed on over to the desert land, where they wandered for 40 years. Oh, they changed the 40 days to 40 years. The folks who wandered in their sandals didn't wear out. Okay, so we know that this is a mystery, and we know that this is mythology. We know it didn't actually happen. Okay, but now this wandering, whether it was for 40 days or 40 years, had to do with the solar god. And we can see the comparison with the number 40 relative to these children of Israel, or the children of the sun, actually. Children of the sun, you know. Because the sun was the one that struggled up from the underworld, too. So they were the children of the sun. Okay. And so we see the similarity between the seed that was planted, and it took 40 days for it to break through the soil and come up as a flower, indicating the solar energy, or the power of the sun, or the sun god, Ra, in this case. But we see the word Ra. We see Ra is embedded in the word Israel, Israel. Well, we know where they came from originally, with their religion, But anyway, the children of Israel, they traveled around and wandered around the desert for all that time. They got tired of wandering around through the desert. Moses went up in the mountain and had to get the law for them, come back down, and they had made a change. They had built a golden calf. That means that they were going back to the old religion. They were going back to, I would say, the religion of the mother and child, sometimes represented as a calf. The child, sometimes represented as a calf. They were going back to the old days. The mother and child religion, which is actually stellar. Religion of the stars. That's what they were going back to. Moses, he come and he broke the calf up and said, no, you stay here with the solar God. You know what I mean? I got some laws for you. And so that's the way that went, folks. So here we have Lent. Now, these conditions for Lent actually existed in no other climate than that of ancient Egypt. That Lent situation is ancient Egyptian situation, borrowed by other folks and used in their religious scriptures or their religious practice. But we can see how it began there in Egypt, especially when you're talking about the Nile River gushing in its highest gate for 40 days and 40 nights every year. It doesn't happen anywhere else in the world. So we see where the number 40 comes from, you see. And the soil there was such that it would take a plant 40 days, a seed, to come up through the soil. We see where all these 40s come from. One place, the Kemites, ancient Egyptians. Okay, folks, thank you very much, and I'll be getting back with you. Okay, bye-bye.